Seems like all I could see was the struggle. Haunted by ghosts that lived in my past. Bound up in shackles of all my failures. Wondering how long is this gonna last? Then you look at this prisoner and say to me, son, stop fighting a fight that's already been won. And I am redeemed. You set me free. So I'll shake off these heavy chains and wipe away every stain. That I'm not who I used to be. I am redeemed. I'm redeemed. All my life I have been called unworthy, named by the voice of my shame and regret. But when I hear you whisper, child, lift up your head, I remember, oh God, you're not done with me yet. I am redeemed. You set me free. So I'll shake off these heavy chains and wipe away every stain. Now I'm not who I used to be. Oh God, I'm not who I used to be. Jesus, I'm not who I used to be. 'Cause I am redeemed. Amen. Thank God, redeemed.
I would like to ask every one of you that is a part, an active part of our Celebrate Recovery ministry to stand up at this time. Everybody that goes there, everybody that's a leader, involved in Landing, involved in Celebration Kids. This group of people is the strongest, most powerful weeknight service that we have at this church. Yeah, we still have Wednesday night Bible studies, and don't get me wrong, I love our Bible studies. Pat and Phil do a great job. We have ministry to the kids, but these folks on Monday nights, there's ministry to the adults, there's ministry to the teenagers in the Landing, there's ministry to the smallest children who are coming in out of dysfunctional homes and struggles. And because of you, because of your involvement, we're impacting the city. And we are redeemed. Amen. Give it up for these folks that are redeemed. Amen, amen, amen. Amen. God bless you. Well, as they're seated, I'm going to go ahead and ask my friend Charlie to come up on the platform at this time. Welcome, Charlie Bramblett. Okay, so, oh, I didn't take the offering, huh? That's true, I didn't. If I could have the ushers come. Actually, that's perfect. Andrea, did I cut off the announcements? There was a video at the end of the announcements, wasn't there? Did you see it? Okay, did it end? Okay, never mind. I'll come back there. We'll mess with it later. All right, Heavenly Father, here they come. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to give into your house and to invest into your kingdom this morning. We pray that you'll bless every gift and every giver and help the pastor remember it's important to take the offering. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So, while he's taking up the offering, we're going to go ahead and move forward, but I want you to notice there's Charlie and there's me, so we need to help Charlie out. Charlie and Brandy Bramblett. No connection to these guys. No no relational connection, no family that goes to the church. You weren't born here. You weren't raised here. You're just part of our community. But you came to a place in your life. Born in this church? I mean, born in. I mean, you weren't raised in this church. Yeah, you said I was born here. I guess I should give more words. I did say it that way. But you know what? Because of Celebrate Recovery and the challenges in their lives that he'll say more about, they came and visited Celebrate Recovery, and it quickly became evident that this was the right place for you to be at the right time. And of course, we fell in love with them, and they fell in love with us, and we're so proud to have them as such a vital, integral part of our Celebrate Recovery program as leaders, but also as a part of our home church. And so I have asked Charlie to come this morning and share with you. Would you give him a warm welcome this morning? Amen. You're hot. Oh, what's that?
I don't know if I'm coordinating.
I gave you a stand.
Okay.
You want me to hold it for you?
No, I got it.
I'll be your page turner.
Hello? Can you hear me okay? Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Charlie Bramblett, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who used to struggle with meth addiction and alcoholism for more than 20 years. I was born in Carlsbad, New Mexico in 1976 by my parents, Pat and Joe Bramblett, who raised me, and I have one older brother that's about 10 and a half years older than me. I don't have very many memories of my father because my parents got divorced when I was about 4 years old. I do know that he was an abusive alcoholic, and that's why my mother felt she needed to divorce him. Shortly after the divorce, my mom became a drink and quickly developed an addiction to alcohol. She never did get married again, but she did get into a relationship shortly after where there was a lot of drinking and drug use involved. Though her boyfriend was a drug addict and alcoholic, she didn't mess around with drugs, and she just drank a lot. And I remember my first experience drinking was at my brother's 18th birthday. That would put me at about 7.5 years old. My mom had thrown my brother a keg party, and throughout the night I kept sneaking beers from the keg and hiding underneath the trailer house that we lived in and drinking all night. And I kept going back and getting more. And I did this for most of the night until I found myself waking up the next morning under the trailer house. And I felt really sick, and I had a headache, but I do remember the way it made me feel. I remember the alcohol, and I remember how I enjoyed that feeling. So this is what it was like for about the next 3 years of my life growing up. Everyone was always drinking, smoking weed, partying, and doing drugs, and they would even let me drink from time to time, I guess, just to watch me act silly. This all came to an end, though, at the end of October 1986, when my mom was in a serious car accident that almost cost her life. She was coming home from the bar one night, and she ran a red light, and she T-boned another vehicle, and she spun out of control and hit a light pole. The steering wheel smashed her forehead and split it from eye to ear, and she had to have her face sewed back together. Well, this was the last time my mom drank. She started going to AA all the time and became serious about her recovery. She went back to school and she became a substance abuse counselor and got her degree in chemical dependency. And it wasn't long until she started working at the Carlsbad Battered Family Shelter, and then she became the director. And shortly she became nominated for Woman of the Year. So recovery and 12-step programs have always been a part of my life since I was young, but it didn't stop me from wanting to try things myself. Even though my mom had learned her lesson, I still had a lot to learn. As I got older, I got more curious, and I started smoking weed, and I started sniffing paint. And by the time I was in the sixth grade, I felt like I had an addiction to sniffing paint. I couldn't seem to stop, even when my mom kept catching me, and I don't know how many times I got kicked off the bus, got kicked out of school. I was staying grounded all the time, but I still found ways of doing what I wanted to do. It's pretty easy when you have a single parent. Once I got into middle school, though, I started getting involved in sports, and that occupied most of my spare time, so I was able to stop sniffing paint. But on the weekends, I started drinking with my friends and experimenting with other drugs. So by the time I was in the 8th grade, I was already doing acid, smoking weed, drinking, along with playing football and running track. And I can remember in the 8th grade, I even got kicked out of one of my classes because I was so high, I was talking to one of my desks and couldn't quit. write big, so there's not much. Once I got into high school, I became more involved in my sports, and I'd even joined the swim team then. So most of my time was occupied. I also found success in all these sports. Along with that, though, I became more involved with my drugs, and I found some way of balancing both of them somehow, or at least I thought. And by the time I was a junior in high school, I was a full-blown alcoholic, and I'd done just about every drug I'd come across. I remember one of my favorite sayings at the time was, "I'm not scared," and that meant I'd try anything once. So halfway through my junior year, I was introduced to meth. And it was like I found my miracle drug. I could stay up longer, I could practice harder, and it seemed like I could even think better and faster. And if I started getting tired, I could always do a little bit more, and by the time I was a senior, I was already started shooting up. And this means I was getting high before track meets, before swim meets, before football games, and sometimes even I would be shooting up at halftime during football games. Felt like I was indestructible. And it wasn't long before it started to do what it does. It destroys. I wasn't eating. I was staying up for days, and I started tearing muscles and overtraining. So, beginning of the track season, my senior year, I tore my hamstring. I was forced to sit out the entire season until the district track meet, which was the last track meet of the year that you qualify for state. And I'd already been to the state track meet 4 years in a row. And I had colleges offer me scholarships for football and track. And football had already been all district first, second team, and I had honorable mentions. So at the district track meet, I ran my 2 hurdle races, and I got second in both of them. I qualified for state. I got to the state track meet, and I ran the prelims, and I qualified for the finals in both of my races. I finished fourth in my first race, and I was seeded first in my second race going into the finals. Halfway through the race, I tore my hamstring again. A little bit worse this time. To make a long story short, I lost my scholarships and had to enroll in college here in Carlsbad until I could rehabilitate. And then I could maybe try to walk on somewhere. But after the first month of college, I realized I wasn't college material. I'd struggled in all my classes because all through high school, my teachers had been giving me my grades because of my athletic ability. And that really kind of hurt. It ended up hurting me in the long run. So I ended up dropping out of college, and I went to work for a contractor here in town, laying bricks. And at $10 an hour at that time, for me, it seemed like a lot of money. So I was going to be a bricklayer for the rest of my life. And my plans of being an athlete slowly faded away. I was drinking and I was using every day. And I figured that was going to be my lifestyle for the rest of my life. Along with drinking and drugging, I came in a lot of trouble with the law. Soon I found myself looking at some pretty serious charges, but I had a plan. I was going to get out of it, so I figured I'd just enlist in the military, and I'd boogie. I'd get out of here, and I didn't get charged with anything. So I enlisted in the Army. I pushed to get processed as quick as I can. I had to get out of Carlsbad before my charges got me. And I went to basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia. And after that, I came home for 2 weeks before going into Ranger school. I had a Ranger contract. For the whole 2 weeks, I stayed up every hour. I didn't sleep one bit. I was high the whole 2 weeks. I went back to Ranger school with a bad attitude and malnutrition. And after about 3 weeks of Ranger school, I messed up my knee, and they put me on sick call. And I was on sick call for so long that by the time I was ready to get back involved, I was so far behind my platoon that I was going to have to restart, and I wasn't going to restart. So I got a general discharge. I came back home, and I fell deeper into my addictions. And starting to going to jail on a regular basis. And that's when I got caught my first felony charge. It was a larceny charge, and I'd stolen a camera from my mom when she found out. She pressed charges on me, and she figured that me getting locked up was probably the only way to save my life because I wasn't going to quit. And dope was my love at the time, and I'd done anything for it. I got lucky in the courts, and the judge gave me a deferred sentence, and I ended up doing 10 months in jail and was released to a 6-month rehab. This was my first of 4 trips to rehab. I really don't have the time to get into all the relationships I was in, but I do want to say that I was in a relationship right before going to jail, and I had a baby on the way. Since the girl I was with jumped straight into another relationship before the baby was born, I was in denial for a long time that the baby was even mine. And I always felt I wasn't fit for raising a child and never put any effort into being in her life. So after rehab, I came back to Carlsbad feeling healed, and I felt that I was in control of my life again. And it wasn't long before I started drinking, and that quickly turned into a full-blown relapse, like it always did. It took me a long time to figure out that one always led to another. So I get to my 20s, and I'm 23 years old now when I start working in the oil field. And all through my 20s was filled with lots of drugs, lots of meth. And it's kind of easy to skip through my 20s because it's kind of a blur anyway. I do know I made a lot of money, and I had nothing to show for it. Staying high was the most important thing in my life, and as long as I had my dope, everything was okay. So now, by the time I'm in my 30s, I'm 31 years old when I meet my wife, Brandy. A friend of mine had brought her over to the house to introduce us, and she had just gotten out of a relationship, and I was single at the time, and I was tired of being in relationships and hurting women. I wasn't wanting to get into another relationship. But I liked Brandy, and I offered her a place to stay, and I let her know right up front that this wasn't supposed to be a serious relationship and not to expect it to be. But we both enjoyed getting high and doing things together, and originally my plan was for her to get a job, kick back, and then get on her feet and go. But things never worked out as planned. God had other plans. Brandy ended up getting pregnant, and I felt it was my obligation to marry her, and we would raise this child together. I never wanted to be like my father, and never being part of my first child's life always bothered me. So things were actually going pretty good. We actually stopped doing dope for a little while while she was pregnant, and I was able to stay clean long enough that I was able to pass a hair follicle test and get another good job on a rig, of course. I never did stop drinking, and there was a few times I slipped and never told Brandy about it because I didn't want her to be tempted to get high with me. And on March 3rd, she gave birth to a beautiful little girl, Zoe Chance Bramblett. And a month later, Brandy's oldest daughter that was taken away from us moved back in with us. She had always lived with her grandpa, and I felt that this was what it was going to take for me to want to stay clean. Being a father, I knew that if anything would make me want to quit getting high and grow up, this was it. Again, I was wrong. I was in control. And it wasn't long before I started to think I could get high again, maybe just once, and that it wouldn't be a problem. You know how that goes, though, from just once to just on the weekends to maybe just on my days off to just not at work or just all the time again. And by the time Zoe was 2.5 years old, I had already lost about 3 jobs because of drug use, and my addictions were worse than ever. I lived with a lot of guilt, but it was never enough to make me want to stop using. Brandy's dad came back to town and took Brody away from us again. And I finally realized that Brandy had a problem. I could stop using if I could just get her to stop. Talk about denial. I honestly thought if I could get Brandy fixed, I'd be able to stop on my own. So it was either Brandy go to rehab or we were just going to have to end the relationship. So she got into Crossroads, and it wasn't long after she was in there, just a couple days, I realized I had a problem too. And she found out that the VIA here in town and the Crossroads had a program where if I wanted to get in, I could go also and we could start working a program together. So the only thing was, though, the VIA was a 1-month program and the Crossroads was a 2-month program. So I got out early than her, and again, I started to think I could drink again. So by the time Brandy got out of Crossroads, I was already into my alcoholism again. I was able to stay clean off the meth though, for a month or so. long enough so I could get another job. And then one day I told Brandy that I happened to run into a friend at a gas station. We just happened to be there together pumping gas, and he offered me some dope. But that was a lie. I wanted to get high, and I went out and bought it. And it wasn't too long before I'd failed another drug test and lose that job. This thing keeps sinking on me. And I failed another drug and got an okay. That was the last time I worked on a rig. I went for about 2 years without working again. Then I got a job at a restaurant at Chapman Steakhouse washing dishes. The drug use just got so worse. The drug use got so bad along the time that there was lots of fighting and lots of abuse. And no one was happy. The baby was always crying. She would get in between me and Brandy all the time and try to keep us from yelling at each other like a referee. Brandy ended up moving out and going to Roswell and staying in a shelter. And then she started staying with a friend. She came by the house one day to get some money because she knew I just got paid to buy Zoe some things for school. And I said no, I didn't believe her, and I pushed her out of the house. Well, we both ended up calling 911 on each other that day. And when the cops showed up, I told them that I'd pushed her out of the house, and they arrested me for battery on a household member. When I was in jail, getting ready to bond out, I was informed that I had already received some more charges and that I wasn't going anywhere. The cops had told Brandy after they arrested me that they'd called CYFD and that they were on their way to get Zoe. So she talked them into a few minutes alone with Zoe and locked herself in the house and ran out the back door with her. It took them 12 hours to find Brandy, and she was on an Amber Alert. So now I was being charged with child abuse, drug paraphernalia, and battery on a household member. They had found syringes in my house while they were looking for Brandy and Zoe, and I got paraphernalia charges. I stayed in jail for 2 weeks until my bond was reduced. I got out, started drinking again like always, and I was high before the next day. I started feeling extremely guilty and angry at God. I couldn't believe that he let this happen to me. I blamed God for Zoe being taken. I also blamed him for my mom because she had just recently got diagnosed with cancer. I stayed up the whole night. I stayed up locked up in my house, cussing God, rolling around on my floor, screaming at him. I even had a Sharpie marker in my hand, and I was writing on the floor how I felt about him. A rage like I'd never felt before. The next morning, I was woke up by a knock on the door. It was a girl I'd worked at with the steakhouse. She came by to check on me. She asked me if I wanted to get myself straight and that she knew a pastor in Roswell that had a men's home and that she could probably get me in if I wanted to go. I said yes. I knew I couldn't stop on my own. And that was the first step right there. I had to admit that I was powerless over alcohol and my life was unmanageable. That was on a Tuesday, and by Friday I was in Roswell. I knew I had a lot of work to do on myself. So I walked in that door and I left all my beliefs behind. I knew I was in need of a serious pruning. I wanted to get rid of all my character defects, and I needed to start planting new seeds and create a new me. Drugs and alcohol were just part of my problem. After meeting a few of the men in the men's home that had been there for a while, I seen that God was working in their lives, and I wanted that. I knew that if God could change their lives, he could change mine. And I found out a few days later that the men's had a bet that I wasn't going to make it a week. And there were several men in there, and none of them betted that I'd make it over a week. The first Sunday service, the pastor preached about marriage. And I felt like he was talking directly to me because I was not being the head of my household. I was not being a provider. I was not being a husband or the father I was supposed to be. I felt the guilt and conviction, and I started resenting myself so bad that I pulled the pastor aside after church. And I told him how I felt that I was wanting to divorce my wife until that service. I felt I could I felt I couldn't forgive myself, and he asked me what gave me the right. If Jesus had already forgiven me, why couldn't I? I knew then that I needed Jesus in my life, and that's when step 3 came. I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And it says in Romans 3 that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart you believe and you are justified. And it is with your mouth you confess and are saved. For who believes will not be put to shame, and everyone who calls in the name of the Lord will be saved. I had to pray, and I had to accept. Okay, my pastor told me that I had to pray and I had to accept his grace. I didn't really know how to pray, but he said to humble myself and thank God for his forgiveness and kindness and pray for others. And I started praying every day. I started praying for my wife. I started praying for Zoe, and I started praying for my mom. And I started praying for the daughters that I didn't even know. I prayed for doors to open and maybe that relationship could be not restored because there never was one, but to develop a relationship. I prayed for God to take away my character defects, take control of my life. My little faith grew into a strong relationship with Christ, and miracles started to happen, and I felt an empty place in my heart start to be filled. My resentments quickly went away, and love started to replace all of them. After a few months, I had an option. I could start going to work, or I could stay at the men's home and work on myself. And I had the rest of my life to work, and I only had 3 months left there to work on me, so I stayed at the home. I made myself available to the pastor in the church. After my first court appearance, I received a treatment plan from CYFD. It was 4 pages long. I had to be in a 6-month program, which I was already halfway through. I had to give no dirty hair follicle tests. I had to have anger management, parenting. I had to start regular visitations with Zoe, and I had to go to counseling. And my pastor was willing to help me do all these things. I started cooking meals at the men's home. And since I was one of the only men that had a driver's license, I started doing most of the driving. Going back and forth to church, PO's office, courts, and getting them into work and to their doctor's appointments. So I was starting to learn a little bit about accountability and responsibility. I spent most of my spare time reading the Word, though, and doing Bible studies. Anything I could do to strengthen my relationship with God. Brandy stayed in jail for about 3 months, so I had a little bit of a head start on her. When she got out, she stayed with some friends, and that year we had a big snowstorm. And all the men from my men's home had to go to the church because my pastor was sure that people were going to show up. They couldn't drive. All the roads were closed, but he was sure that people were going to come to church that Sunday. And there was a man up there. He was cleaning. He happened to be cleaning parking lots to make extra money. And he was up there on the weekends. And he happened to be up there when we were cleaning our parking lot. And he came over to the parking lot to the church. And he asked the men from so I just left. I'd have to go run an errand. I had to take somebody to work. And he asked the men that were out there cleaning, the other guys from the home, if they knew a Charlie Bramblett. They told him yes, that I just left to take someone to work, and he told them that Brandy Bramblett was living with him at the time. And he had heard about me and knew that I was in Roswell in a men's home, but he didn't know that was it. So the next week they brought Brandy up to church, and that's the first time I'd seen her. She was still waiting to go into rehab in Albuquerque, and I knew right then God was working in our lives. So for about 4 months into my program, the pastor made me the assistant director. I stayed pretty busy. I started working with new men coming in and sharing my experience with them. And I was doing everything I could, plus. I talked with my mom and Brandy on a regular basis and even tried to contact my first daughter, but she didn't want nothing to do with me. I was going to CYFD every week and doing my phone visits with Zoe. And I got to come down to Carlsbad once a month. I prayed for Zoe so much because she had been put in a foster home where a family that never spoke English and a mother that neglected her. Zoe started going to school and acting more and more distant and quiet, and the teacher could tell something wasn't right with Zoe. She was depressed and she started eating her hair. Needless to say, the teacher reported it, and Zoe was taken from that family and put with the lady that was a true blessing. Her teacher even started getting certified to be a foster parent because she was wanting to adopt Zoe herself. The first lady lost her license, needless to say, and she never got to foster again. Or she hasn't yet. I didn't leave the men's home after my 6 months was up. I felt that I needed a little bit more than 6 months. But after 7 months came around, CYFD told me that I could start getting my weekend visits with Zoe. And so I came home. And my mom wasn't doing very well either, and she needed someone there with her. So it kind of worked out just right. I came home and I moved in with my mom, started going to AA meetings a lot and finishing everything on my treatment plan. When I went to court, all my charges were dropped. The child abuse I got 3 years felony probation with another deferred sentence. I never failed another drug test. I started a job cleaning parking lots at night with a friend of mine from AA and started getting Zoe a few hours on one weekend. I worked my way up to overnight visits to where I'd get another day each week. I'd work my way up to where I had her 7 days a week. I went to the DVR and they helped me get my CDL. My job cleaning parking lots kind of turned into a weekend thing. So I was able to go to school in Artesia all week, going to CDL school. And I got Zoe at night and on the weekends. And I'd take her to work with me at night. She'd drive around the county with me doing parking lots. She loved it. By the time I was getting close to finishing school, Brandy was able to come home. And it was perfect timing because I had Zoe almost 7 days a week and I needed someone to help me watch her. So my mom finally let Brandy come to the house. My mom never we worked our way up to where my mom wouldn't let either one of us come to the house, but she couldn't keep me. I was her son, but Brandy wasn't allowed over there. And Brandy proved herself to my mom that we were working a good program. We were trying to stay sober, and we all ended up moving in with my mom. Where was that? Every time I go off on a tangent, I lose my place. Brandy started going to CR, and right off the bat. And she happened to talk with a man who was needing to hire someone at that time with the CDL. And it's kind of weird how it works out. So she told him about me, and I met with a guy named Ray and his wife Debbie one night after CR. And Ray had just given his testimony that night, and he was wanting to hire me. And so I followed them to their house, and I got an application. And a week later, I took my first CDL test, and my first CDL test, I didn't pass it. So I got a week, and I had to wait another week, and the second week I passed my CDL test, and it happened to be exactly 1 year from the day I went into the men's home. I called Ray on the way home from Roswell that day, and told him I passed my test, and I've worked with Ray now every day for over 2 years, and I've never had a job for over a year in my life. I've had some years where I've had to fill out more than 8 W-2 forms. I didn't come to Celebrate Recovery because I went to AA on Monday nights, and I thought I knew that they were in there for 3 hours, and I thought, well, that's just a little too long. But I didn't know nothing about it, really. But that changed. One weekend, I was invited to go to an All Together rally. It was in Austin, Texas, and I went with Ray and Debbie had taken me and Brandy. And I'll never forget that experience. There was over 4,000 people there with different hurts, habits, and hang-ups, and all of them believing in Jesus Christ. I instantly felt I was at home. It didn't matter what their hurts, habits, and hang-ups were. It's just their belief was all the same. And I've been coming to CR ever since. It's been over a year now. I started working the steps and finding out more about myself and strengthening my relationship with God, and working on being a leader and becoming and working with other addicts. So now I've gotten Brandy back, I've gotten Zoe back, and I've gotten Brody back. My mom's cancer was healed. When I came home from Roswell, they couldn't find cancer in her anymore. I've got a good job, and I've got good friends, and I got my life, and I have Jesus to thank for all of it. But I did lose my mom. My mom died. We buried her on June 1st. She was able to beat the cancer, but she couldn't beat the COPD. But without Jesus, I'd never been able to handle this. I was always worried about this my whole life. What am I going to do when I lose my mama? But I know in my heart that she's in a better place now, and she isn't suffering anymore. And she didn't have to worry about me being an addict anymore, being strung out when she died. I've got over 3 years clean and sober now. And honestly, that's the longest I've been sober since I was 7 years old. I know that she's in heaven because we would talk about Jesus and we'd talk about the Bible. For the last couple years of her life, we'd sit down and we'd talk. And I have no regrets. I know everything that I've been through is God's way of chiseling me into the man I am now and who I am becoming. Miracles work in my life every day, and God gets all the glory. My oldest daughter, Natalie, has even reached out to me and has forgiven me, and now we are getting to know each other. We've gone to several churches trying to find a home here in Carlsbad. We have found the best one that fills our needs. First Assembly of God has welcomed us and treated us like family. We have made a lot of good friends here, and I thank God for everyone that's here today. Who knows where I'd be right now, but with it, I do know where I am, and for that, I am thankful. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
So proud of you, buddy. Praise God. Go ahead and be seated for just a second. So, I didn't get a chance to hear Charlie's testimony over at CR, but when I talked to Shirley, I said I want to make the Sunday before Thanksgiving about redemption, and I can't think of a better way to do it than to have one of our testimony services. And when we first started CR, you've heard this, most of you heard this before. When we first started CR, part of that process is they have to prepare their personal testimony, right? So Shirley said, "Yeah, could we have one of them share in the Sunday morning service? You know, they work on it, they train it. We have them, we listen to it. They're 5 to 7 minutes, Pastor. 5 to 7 minutes. They're going to work on this testimony. 5 to 7 minutes." And I said, "Well, we can fit that in, no problem." So I get a whole sermon ready and had the first one get up to share their testimony and go, "Okay, well, we're going to just pray and close." After about, I think we did like 2, maybe 3 of them, Shirley, and finally, and every time Shirley goes, "I'm so sorry, Pastor, I'm so sorry." They get excited and they get up there and they get talking. And finally, it was like the second or third time I said, "Shirley, here's the thing. We're not going to stop doing Testimony Sundays with Celebrate Recovery, okay? We're just going to realize that it needs to be the service. We'll just give them the whole service, let them share." There's probably nothing I can say to top what they're going to say that Sunday anyway. So, but I've been thinking about how I wanted to close the service today. And at first, I had it in my mind. I was going to have you bow your heads and have the leadership come forward and have people who find themselves, when you hear a testimony like Charlie's, and you stop and you look at your own life, and maybe it's in the shadows. Maybe nobody even knows what's going on in your life. But when you hear him talking, you realize maybe it's not drugs, maybe it's not meth, but there's something in your life that's controlling you that you just can't seem to get free of. And I was going to have the leaders come and have you come forward to be prayed for. But then God, while Charlie, while you were sharing, the Spirit put a check to me and said, don't do that. Because the truth is, I could have you bow your heads right now, and I could call for an altar call, and I could get a response. And you would come forward genuinely, and God would do something great in your life at this moment. But what you need right now, if you're here today, and in your spirit and in your heart, you're feeling, you relate to Charlie in that you're saying, I just can't seem to get free. I keep trying. I keep thinking I'm good. I go through a program, and I get my head clear, so as soon as my head's clear, I think I'm fixed, but I'm not fixed. The problems and the addictions and the mindsets, they're not fixed, and I keep falling right back into it, and I don't know how to be free. You could come forward, and you could be blessed. What you need to do is be here tomorrow night at 5:30. That's what you need, because what you need is a support group, right, Charlie? Had you not been in the home, had you not been in a situation where people could understand you and that you could relate to each other, and you could, in your weaknesses and in your strengths, you could be their support today, and they would be the ones picking you up tomorrow. And it's that creates that freedom, right, Randy, for you guys? Celebrate Recovery, that's what it does for you, right? Yeah, 3 hours. Seems like a long time. But once you plug in and you get there, you come to CR, you realize, listen, 3 hours goes by way too fast. So if you're here today and you're saying, I just really want to be free. Well, I'm not a drug addict. Well, I'm not an alcoholic. Celebrate Recovery is not about alcoholism and addiction. It's about people who have something in their life that's holding them captive, a habit, a hang-up, or whatever it is, whether it's anger, bitterness, doubt in yourself, low self-value, abused as a child, whatever it is, that's that thing that keeps you from truly being free. Celebrate Recovery is about people coming together in a very real situation, sharing their very real challenges, and realizing they're not the only ones that are going through it. And there are people around you that would love to help you. So I want to challenge you today, instead of an altar call. You need that breakthrough? Tomorrow night, 5:30, they gather for dinner, and then they'll have service. You'll begin a brand new journey. Well, I am going to close with one last video, that one I just had you download. Did you get it? Okay, cool. Just one more incentive to be here tomorrow night. Go ahead.
Like those hurts and those habits and those hang-ups are making you ask, is this as good as it gets?
Every day.
Well, fear no more, my friend, because there is a place for you and you to work through all those past hurts.
That's right. It's called the Donut Shop. It's the Donut Shop. Share your worries and your problems while you chew. Don't mind if I do.
All right, no. I'm not talking about any donut shop. You missed it by that much. I am talking about a place, a real place, called Celebrate Recovery, and we would love for you to check out Celebrate Recovery. This is the place for you to work out your hurts, your habits, and your hang-ups, and it'll help you to realize that your present isn't paralyzed, and your future, it has hope.
Do they have a recovery group for people who like donuts?
Yes, they do. They truly do.
What about pizza? I really like pizza.
Okay, you need to stop now. So, check out Celebrate Recovery and start the beginning of your whole new life.
And if you come the first time, everybody gets free donut. You get a donut, you get a donut, you get a donut. I'm the Oprah of donuts. I'm Don Oprah.
You're going to have your own special group.
Here's the thing, it doesn't matter what it is that's holding you back. There's a way to be free, and it's in community and in family. We are so proud of you, Shirley, proud of your leadership team, proud of all of you, how far we've come. Yep, and Shirley's down there going, it's all y'all, and that's the truth. I have a great church, but it wasn't just me. It takes a lot of people coming on board. And last Monday night, they had their Thanksgiving dinner, And we couldn't really get a clear count, but somewhere around 160 or plus were there for their Monday night service. It was a packed house. 24 kids in Celebration Place. I mean, it's incredible what God is doing. We're so proud of you, all of you that are part of Celebrate Recovery, that have become a part of that community and that family. We're so proud of every one of you. We know that this Thanksgiving you have a lot to be thankful for. Amen. Stand to your feet, everybody. Heavenly Father, today we thank you for this incredible testimony and this reminder to each and every one of us that we all live lives, and sometimes that life we're living is in the shadows. Sometimes we begin to question whether anybody, even if we shared with them what we were going through, whether they would even understand. If there was really any place we could go to be free, because we've tried so many different ways to be free. The true power of Celebrate Recovery isn't the 12 steps, and it isn't the great lessons, God. It is the reality that is built on the principles of God, who desires that every man be set free. And whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And God, we thank you for the opportunity to truly be free. I speak your blessings over Celebrate Recovery, and I pray, God, that they will continue to draw people from every walk of life, from every corner of the city and cities around us, God, that it will continue to be that beacon of light that it is right now in our community. There isn't a single thing. There's so many great things we're doing as a church. There isn't a single thing I'm more proud of than this Celebrate Recovery group and the lives that it is touching and the changes that are being made. God, you're changing the culture of Carlsbad, New Mexico. Continue to empower us to stay the course. And I pray for all of those that are here today, but especially those that this testimony spoke to. I pray, God, you will not let them off the hook. They need to respond to the altar, but not here today, tomorrow. Don't let anything get in the way, God. Don't let any excuses, any reasonings convince them that somehow they can do it better on their own, because Charlie would be the one that they need to talk to about how it works out when you keep trying to do it on your own. We're just not wired that way, God. Help them to be free. In Jesus' name, amen. See you guys tonight. Thanksgiving.